So the better attitude would be, if you come over to the United States, we're going to treat you like a human being. We don't care what color you are. We don't care what gender. We don't care what your sexual orientation is. But we want to tell you something. Don't come over to this country with a bunch of baggage that you don't like us, or you hate our system, or you hate capitalism, or it's unfair. Just stay home. But if you do come here, we don't care if you're white, brown, or black, and we're not going to treat you any worse or any better.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Friday news roundup, so we're going to look at some of the stories from the week, and we've got lots on the agenda. Gerrymandering, or claims of gerrymandering in the state of Texas, has started a ruckus. We have an Illinois representative who is more proud of being Guatemalan than she is American. And then we'll take a look at Gaza. So stay with us for those stories, and we'll be right back from these messages. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. For everybody who's new, Victor is the Martin and Illy Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. Everything's there. His books are linked there, also his writings from other publications, and then he does special writing and a video for Ultra subscribers at the website. So please come join us for $6.50 a month or $65 a year, and we'd love to have everybody. So Victor, the big controversy this week seems to be that in Texas in particular, the Democrats are claiming that the Republicans are trying to gerrymander the districts, and so they've up and left the state entirely so they can prevent a quorum in their assembly to even have a vote on new districting that the Republicans want to do. And the Republicans have sent out arrest warrants, and Trump has not ruled out, as he often says, bringing in the FBI. And so I was wondering your thoughts on this.
Yes. The first question is it legal or not? Yes, it is legal. They have the right to redistrict this year. Number two, is gerrymandering confined to Texas or Republicans? No, all states do it. Number three, who's better at it, the Democrats or the Republicans? The Democrats are far better at it. If you take Illinois, where they fled to, Trump got about 45% of the vote. I think they have 3 out of, 20? 17 to 3. So they're underrepresented by 4 times. If you look at Massachusetts, where Trump got 40% of the vote, you would think that they would have 2 or 3. So they have none. Here in California, of the 53, I think we have 11 or 12. So we have about 20% of the House seats. Donald Trump got about 41%. So they're very good at it. So why are they angry and fleeing? They did this with Scott Walker, remember, about unionization, making unionization dues not mandatory. They all fled out of state. They always do this like adolescents. What we're watching is an adolescent meltdown. And I shouldn't say adolescent, that's not fair at all. It's a terrible twos. They had 3 children, and I remember once when I said to one of my children in the store, and everybody's gone through this, you're not going to get Pop-Tarts. They were actually 4 or 5. They laid on their back and kicked up in the air. I want my Pop-Tart. Well, that's what they are. I mean, there's Cory Booker is screaming and yelling like Spartacus again for no reason. There's Hakeem Jeffries with his little club. Now they're hitting watermelons and smashing watermelons.
There's Al Green, too.
There's Al Green. I'm taking him down, and I'm taking him down. Okay. And then you got all this juvenile stuff, and what they're not doing. This is our contract for America. We want to do this on the border on transgender, because they're not doing it because nobody wants what they have. So they're just a one-trick pony, Trumpist, Hitler, tyranny. Could I say something, Democrats? Tyranny, you say? This is tyranny. This is dictatorship. When you weaponize in one day, on November 18th, 2022, and you appoint a special counsel to go after Donald Trump for having 102 so-called classified documents out of 13 or 14,000 in his home, and you sick the FBI on him, and Jack Smith was appointed that day to investigate that, the same day Nathan Wade is charging the White House, what, $200 an hour to meet with the White House counsel? Can I ask you Democrats a question? I listened to Nathan Wade. He didn't come across as a legal eagle. So why would you get this guy from an obscure Fulton County investigation and bring him into the White House the same day you appoint Jack Smith, the special prosecutor? Oh, I forgot. And why would the third ranking Attorney General in Merrick Garland's DOJ, and that's a very important position. You get judicial appointments when you get that. Why would he come from Alvin Bragg, Manhattan suit, into the DOJ, and then he would leave again? Excuse me, why would he come from Letita James and then go back to Alvin Bragg, all on the same day? That is tyranny. That's tyranny. Getting the FBI to work with Facebook and Twitter to suppress news, that's tyranny. Trying to take a major candidate off the ballot, that is tyranny. I could go on and on with disinformation. So this is what the Democrats do. They bolt, they flee, they scream, they yell, they get on their back and kick up in the air. They do this smutty little videos. We had Jasmine Crockett saying Donald Trump is a piece of blank. Yeah, Jasmine. She always goes from the prep school, spoiled brat, upper middle class childhood when she wants to act snobbish to when she wants to go full inner city and she has that fake accent as if she doesn't care and she's a wild woman. And that is the face of the Democratic Party and the squad. That is who they are. And I'm not saying they're not going to win the House. They can. Because all they're going to say is they're going to tell you that Donald Trump is Lucifer one day, Satan the next, the devil the third. And that's what they're going to do. And we'll see if it works.
Well, speaking of Democratic antics, we have a Illinois representative, Delia Ramirez, who was down in Mexico City, and she got up and she said it in Spanish, and the translation was, it's hard to get this wrong, "I'm proud to be a Guatemalan before I am an American." And I don't think that's a good thing to say if you're a representative in Congress. But what are your thoughts, Victor?
I would be the 5 millionth person to say, if you don't like it, go home. But we know she won't go home. She came here, the child of illegal aliens. I think she's married to an illegal alien. How can a member of Congress not get her husband legalized? I mean, it's not hard to do if you're a U.S. citizen. So it's just part of this same, it's reminiscent of Barack Obama. We're not an exceptional country. Remember that? Or we're only exceptional the way Greece thinks it's exceptional and Britain thinks it's exceptional, or the apology tour, we go to Turkey and then talk about Native American genocide or whatever he was talking about. It's the same thing of the LA protests where you spit or burn the flag of the country under no circumstances you leave, and you wave the one you won't go back to. So it's always been that way with the left. They're internationalist humanists, so they feel their allegiance is to humanity. That's a good take on it. The bad take of it, they're just ingrates. And remember, she's a member of the squad. She said she was a member of the squad. And we had Bowman. He got kicked out. Remember Bowman? He was the one that let off the fire alarm.
Yeah.
And then he said a bunch of crazy things in addition. And then we had Cori Bush. She was a member of the squad. She hired her boyfriend or husband or something to be her security. It was fraud. They kicked her out. She lost the election. And then we had Ilhan Omar, who said that she was surprised what a trashy country it was compared to Somalia, and that she never saw dictatorship in Somalia as much as she did the oldest democracy in the world here in the United States. She's the one that had a map, I think, in her office with no Israel on it. And then we had AOC and all of her little psychodramas about eat the rich and trying to get her boyfriend in to claiming sometimes he's her husband and some days he's not, depending on whether she gets a discount or expenditures paid for him. So they're all con artists in a very pathetic, low grade way, and they all can't just say they like the United States. It's the best place in the world to be, and they're happy they're here. And I once asked my Swedish grandfather why his father brought them all, why they came to the United States, because he was farming and it was very hot. It was like 105, and my father used to plant cotton when I was about 6, and he would make us go out and glean the cotton. Boy, that tears your hands up. They had a primitive cotton picker, 2-wheel thing, and it didn't get everything. So we would go out with these big cloth sacks and pick cotton, and they'd weigh it. So my grandfather was out there helping us. He was, gosh, he must have been 65, 70 years old. So I said, why did you come here? Isn't Sweden cold? Wouldn't it be nice? And he said, listen, Victor, we were farming, my dad was farming rocks, and it was cold. And you never could do anything but farm rocks. There was no way you could ever get a place like this. You had 45 acres. This is the best soil in the world. Anybody who doesn't understand that is crazy. This is a guy who was telling me this, who was born, his mother was pregnant when they left Sweden, and he was born actually in Chicago on the way out to California. And he was drafted at 26 years old to go to Fort Lewis, Washington, where he was a teamster. He raised and broke horses, and they assigned him to train black teamsters. So he trained, but as he said, they were great horsemen. And then they transferred him into a combat unit at the St. Mihiel, and he got his esophagus and stomach eaten out with phosphine gas. And he was disabled forever after that. And he never complained a thing. All he did was praise the United States. Although he had a prejudice. He liked Belgians, he didn't like French. That's all he said. He was in a
I feel
hospital.
exactly the same.
He was in a Belgian hospital for 1 year. He didn't get back till 1920.
Oh my gosh. So Victor, I was just thinking while you were talking that the key to it is that Dalia Ramirez here is second generation, and she hates America. And it's so weird. You were just talking about your own grandfather. There's a whole generation of immigrants that came in that didn't end up either fostering, or their second generation didn't decide they hated the United States. And
No, he went to the draft. His father was Swedish, and the draft board said, one of your boys is going to go right now. Which one is it going to be? He had 4 sons. Yeah. The others were too young. They were 15, 16. They had a big difference in age. And he said, take the oldest one. And he went, and he paid a terrible price, and he loved this country. And I don't get this idea that we're letting in all of these immigrants, and first and second generation. They come in from some of the worst places economically, socially in the world. Puerto Rico, from the family of AOC. Rashid Tlaib, Palestine. And then you have people like Ilhan Omar, Somalia. And then they come in here, and then they get scholarships for college. They qualify for affirmative action, DEI. It's almost as if the moment you set foot in the United States and you're not a U.S. citizen, and some of these were, some weren't, you all of a sudden are on the right side of the Marxist binary as an oppressed. So you come in from here, Michoacan, you walk 1 foot in the United States, and you say, well, back in Michoacan, I was a victim of American racism. So I need to get free tuition in state, da-da-da-da-da. And then you get all of that. And then what you start to do is attack the United States. That's what they do. The squad people, the left does. And everybody just says, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, Obama's father came from Kenya, and he was an alcoholic. He got in a wreck. He hurt people. You know what I mean? An auto wreck and everything. And wasn't that a great thing that he came here and then he was subsidized basically by his wife, or his wife's family helped him, and he took off. He was a miserable person. He abandoned his own kid. And yet that was the identity that propelled his political career. The name, it was no longer Barry Soetoro. It was Barack Obama that he rebranded himself as his birth name. But he didn't use that when he was a preppy, but he did. So my point is that this society bends over backward for DEI, and yet it gives the wrong impression that it's weak or it's guilty and that you can take advantage of it. So the better attitude would be, if you come over to the United States, we're going to treat you like a human being. We don't care what color you are. We don't care what gender. We don't care what your sexual orientation is. But we want to tell you something. Don't come over to this country with a bunch of baggage that you don't like us, or you hate our system, or you hate capitalism, or it's unfair. Just stay home. But if you do come here, we don't care if you're white, brown, or black, and we're not going to treat you any worse or any better. And if you did that and you cut back on entitlements, then you would have a return to the prior immigration, that people came here because they wanted to be Americans and they praised the United States. And what I don't like about it is somebody like this representative from Guatemala or somebody like Omar. We have this idea that we say, as soon as you come in and you're an immigrant, you're just like any other. Yes, that's true. And that's what's great about America. You are treated exactly the same the moment you become a citizen than somebody who's been here 5 generations. But that doesn't mean you get psychologically to erase what everybody did for you to enjoy this. So what I would say to Miss Guatemala is, do you know anything about, I don't know, Shiloh? Do you know anything what Gettysburg was like? Do you have any idea what Belleau Wood was like? Do you know what Choiseul was like? Do you know what the Battle of Bulge was like? Do you know what people went through on Okinawa? Do you know what it was like to be in a B-17 flying over Europe when you're getting a 10% loss rate every single mission? Do you know what those people suffered in Vietnam? So you just come in here and you just erase all that and you say you'd rather be a Guatemalan. But these people all died to create this country that you apparently liked. You apparently liked it so much they gave you all sorts of subsidized education and advantages. You ran as a DEI candidate. You're a congresswoman. And you can't just give the dead a little bit of, I really appreciate what people did, so this country welcomed me and I was able to be a congresswoman, and they can't do that because you know why? They're ingrates.
Yeah.
And the left encourages that victimization.
Yeah. It does. And it also, the left also encourages general ignorance and appreciation for the moral code of people like Hamas. And that's our next story. So there was a really great article by a British author, Melanie Phillips.
And
I know
she Melanie. Was trying I've met her before.
Yeah, she was trying to explain why the picture of, and I hope I get his name right, Eviatar David, who looked like a skeleton, he's a prisoner of Hamas, came out, and it didn't get any press or any shock. Everybody just it didn't get much attention. And at the same time, we have France, Britain, Canada saying they're going to recognize Palestine as a state, which means they're going to recognize Hamas, essentially, although they did not say exactly that, but that's your only choice there. And that there were fake pictures that were published by the New York Times, I believe, of a young child who had a disease. And so he did look very thin. He was a Gazan, but they used it to say, look, the Israelis are starving Gazans. And then there was a long controversy because the little boy that was also in the picture, if anybody used it entirely, which they didn't, they just focused, was very healthy. But this young kid that had a
they had a picture of him digging his own grave.
And the Israeli that is a hostage, that as well, right? So she was trying to make sense of that. How can we have this horrible, thuggish, hating, murderous Hamas people and then have these people in the West, whole nations, or at least national leadership supporting them? And she said, basically, she concludes that the left is willing to overlook the Nazi-like elements of Hamas because they consider it a matter of conscience somehow, and that we're going to turn away from a traditional Western moral system, or the left is, to accept these people. And that was kind of her argument, that the acceptance of Hamas as somehow legitimate is an obfuscation or a turning away of the moral grounding that we have in the West and the
There's two
Western
issues
mind.
here. One is what I would call boutique and cheap caring. So affluent Westerners know that they can, from a distance, feel good about themselves saying they are against genocide or Hamas because it's never going to come home to them, they think. You know what I mean? If Hamas was using suicide vests and blowing up their Upper West Side block, they would have a different view. In fact, there's a story today, I think, that Beacon Hill, where John Kerry lives and some of the Kennedy family lives, suddenly it's being overrun with drug users, and they are upset. All of their morality is in the abstract, and when they say genocide or this or that, they never give you the alternative agenda. Okay, let's stop the agenda so you tell us what you would do if you were Israel. Just tell us. Now, would you let Hamas come back, who planned the October 7th massacres? If you wouldn't let them come back, how would you get rid of them? Do you really think if Hamas was not there, the Israelis would let people starve? They're trying to give as much food as they can. They know that anybody who takes food from them will be hunted down and shot by Hamas. You know that 80% of some of these convoys are hijacked by Hamas from the UN? So they never give you a positive thing. And that's one thing. And then the second part is it's something that goes back to classical Greece, and people noted it in Greek and Rome, and it was what one of our guests had called oikophobia, hating your own culture. And the West, because it is free and self-critical, which is good, and because it has free market capitalism, which produces goods and services in surfeit, you create a wealthy, self-critical, detached population. And part of that, and you can see it in Roman literature, you can see it in Greek, they start to attack their own culture. And they focus on things, and they feel good about it, that they're separated from the masses. Horace has a good poem. I hate the turba, and I keep myself away from it. But the point I'm making is, in modern post-Western Western, it brings you greater psychological comfort and more careerist advantages to say that you hate the Israelis than it does what else is Israel supposed to do from these people who want to kill them. In other words, if you said to these critics, in 2005, there was a United Nations-sponsored election. Hamas won. They got their wish. There was regularly scheduled elections. The Palestinian Authority said they were going to challenge them. They threw them off rooftops. They killed about 200 of their politicians. They ethnically cleansed them from Gaza. Then the Israelis said, it's not worth dealing with Hamas, and we're going to get out. So all the settlements that were all over Gaza, Sharon took out. And then they said, well, what about the infrastructure? We have one of the most sophisticated greenhouse industries for winter vegetables shipped to Europe. And some American philanthropic Jewish Americans said, well, we'll give them the money. We'll give $50 million and we'll buy these from you. Don't dismantle them. We'll buy them and we'll give them to the Gazans. And they did. And what happened? They destroyed them. They stripped them down in a week. And they never held another election. Does anybody believe that if they had been holding elections, they were the recipients of billions of dollars? All Hamas had to do is said, no tunnels, no rockets, we're going to outdo the Jews. We're going to make this like the Emirates. We got a better coastline than they do. We've got just as many historical artifacts. We've got our friendly Egypt and Jordan on one side. We're going to show them up. We're going to make this paradise. would we be in this situation today? No.
No, but they don't have a culture that encourages enterprise. They have
Well,
a
I mean, the Arab
culture.
world is very entrepreneurial. Look at Immigrants, look at Kuwait, look at Saudi Arabia, look at all these countries. They've used their oil to good advantage, but they can't stand to be next to the Israelis because the Israelis are so successful and so competent, and they just want to say, we want to destroy these people. And they have these adherents here. And boy, if Donald Trump does one thing, we have about 1 million foreign students of various categories. 1 million. And there's probably 300,000 from communist China and probably a couple 100,000 from illiberal regimes in the Middle East. I don't know why we do this other than the universities charge them full freight. They charge them about 110% of tuition. So if Americans' tuition is 60,000 a year at these Tony places, 70,000, they probably get discounts with scholarships and loans down to 40. Not if you're from the foreign student, you pay 110%. We should just, I don't understand why we give visas from illiberal countries. We should just say, you know what? Muhammad Atta was a foreign student. How did that work out, Germany? We don't want it. We don't want people to come from this country that hate us and are from illiberal regimes that hate us. So we're not going to issue a student visa from the West Bank, from Gaza, from Iran, from China, from North Korea, all these countries. Just stay home. And if you come over here and you demonstrate, we don't want you here. I know it's free to demonstrate, but you're on a student visa to study. And it's not a matter of the Bill of Rights. We just don't have to issue it. It's just like when you apply to college, you don't get in. Is that you get a right to sue and say it's not fair that I got in and he is? No. So you just say to people who want to come here, we don't want you to come here. And they say, well, that's not fair. Well, it's no different than a university's admissions. It's an honor to come to the United States. We would prefer you not come. If we did that, did we have all these protests 30 years ago on campus like this? I was on campus. I don't remember them.
Me neither.
It's another legacy of the left.
Yeah, and if I could just finish this with her conclusion about why people are accepting the gaslighting on the issue of what Hamas really is. She says the total repudiation of reason that's created this terrifying looking glass world has resulted from decades of cultural attrition waged by elites determined to destroy Western identity and values. And so she goes even further than you've said, that these elites want to destroy our identity and values
Well, what made the West, whether you like it or not, was free market capitalism, constitutional government, independent judiciary, rationalism, the nuclear family, the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they don't believe in any of that. So what they're basically saying is all those people did all this stuff, and we're going to live off the fumes, but we're going to try to destroy their legacy. They never come up with an alternate. What's Mondami says? Where's he going to get the money when he says he's going to do this and this and this and this and this? And where's the example that it worked? And yet they're going to vote for him. And when he's trashed the United States every way he can. And he came over here from what was so good about Uganda? If it was so good, why didn't he stay there? His family. And what happened when they got here as Indian immigrants from Uganda? His mother became a marquee filmmaker, and his father became an endowed professor. And yet they can't say a positive thing about the United States. And yet they do want to stay here. That's what's so weird, that all these people fight deportation. You would think from what they said when we saw all those Columbia Middle East students, and some of them were going to be sent back, they say, thank you. I hated this place. I hate this culture. I get back to Gaza and Palestine where I'm really happy. But they don't.
It's a very strange, confused world, Victor.
People are very tired of it. They're very sick of it. They're sick of the whole ethnic chauvinism, racial chauvinism, sexual orientation chauvinism, gender chauvinism. They're just tired of it.
Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plum hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen. Made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. Found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut, type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything. Coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Visit getnativepath.com/Victor and start your transformation today. That is GETNATIVEPATH.com/VICTOR. I personally love the PM Collagen formula with melatonin. It's given me many nights of great sleep, and the electrolyte drink mix for my water at workouts. They are my friends, and I'm sure they will be yours. So, Victor, speaking of crazy things that the Democrats are doing, Mark Halpern recently, I think he was on a video podcast, and he said basically that Trump is benefiting from Trump derangement syndrome because all these people like Jasmine Crockett's outbursts and Al Green's rants and Elizabeth Warren's warnings are so crazy that people are turning to the Republican Party, to MAGA, to Trump himself as the sane alternative, I guess we would say.
Well, we'll see. We have a midterm coming up, November of next year. You know, it's only less than 15 months away. And traditionally, I think there's been only 4 times since 1900 where the N party picked up seats. They only have 7 or 8 seat margin. And we'll see if all these stories are correct, that people don't like the Democrats and they're going to do something historic and not lose the Republican seats. But there's 2 things that we don't know. There's 2 known unknowns. We don't know the effect every single day. Trump is Hitler, Trump is Hitler, Trump is Hitler. And it's everywhere because they control the legacy media, the newspapers, not all the media anymore, but the corporate boardroom, K through 12, academia, professional sports, popular culture, foundations, and that's all you hear. And so that's one thing. And then the other, we don't know the effect of what they're saying on what I would call the independent voter. Doesn't have to be the white voter, but I mean the middle class voter, when he hears Jasmine Crockett that I'm tired of you all white people, white, that kind of stuff. And Donald Trump is a piece of SH blank. And Cory Booker screaming at the top of his lungs, or Chuck Schumer crying, or Nancy Pelosi in one of her bizarre fits, or Elizabeth Warren shaking her finger like a school mom. You know, yeah, you're going to go to detention.
And Bernie Sanders
And
does
Bernie
the same
Sanders,
thing.
you know, the old commie Marxist, or Tim Walz dancing around as if he's on some kind of Adderall or something. We don't know of this clown show. And it seems to me that it's going to lose a lot of people. But at the same time, you turn on the media and you can turn on Fox News and see that there's a lot of illegal immigrants are killing innocent people. through DUIs and violence. You turn on any of the others, nothing. You turn on Fox News and you'll see Cincinnati and you'll see stories about Washington, D.C., where people are being beaten up on the street and racially charged. You won't see any of that on the other channels or the newspapers. You'll see everything about genocide, 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 but you won't see any of the things of Israel trying to feed people and the resistance they have from Hamas. So it's hard to know where we are as a country. All we know is one thing, that people are leaving the blue states. They are leaving Minnesota. They were leaving Oregon. They're leaving California, and they're going to red state models. Low taxes, less government, cheaper standard of living, less regulations, and more freedom and more prosperity. And it's very ironic because 75% of these red state destinations are from the so-called backward Old South. And what's happened in this country is the North became the South and the South became the North. The North was a liberal, didn't take in consideration race. It had good universities. It promoted family values. And the South was kind of a no middle class. It was a plantation. It was obsessed with race. It was agrarian, and economically it was behind. Now the North blue states are obsessed with race, obsessed with it. They don't have a middle class. It's very wealthy people in California, very poor. And the red states are freedom, do your thing, family values. We don't care what color you are, what race. And it's completely flipped. And that's why you get one drop rule, for example. If you're 1/16th black or Hispanic in California, you can con your way into, it's almost like you need a genealogist to just get anywhere in our country. And it's very ironic. And it, it's almost eerie how the blue states have picked up the old Confederate ethos, sanctuary cities, federal nullification of laws, nullifying federal law, just like South Carolina. The U.S. government has no role here at Fort Sumter. Or Alabama in 1861, this armory, it's a federal armory, belongs to us. You can't come into it. Or George Wallace in 1962, 1963, standing in, federal guard has no role here in Alabama. I can be segregated. That's what the sanctuary cities are. Get out of our city. We're going to let illegal immigrant criminals stay in our jails. You can't deport them.
I think that's why Trump's polls are always going up, even though the left thinks, oh, they finally got him, it's going to go down. But I think there's enough people that are seeing the border didn't need new legislation, as the left told us. And there's enough who read enough to know that Russia hoax is in fact a hoax.
He just has to get about 46 or 47 approval, because if you look at the polls in the 2024 election, the NPR poll, the Marius poll, Harvard, they all had him down 3 to 4%, and he won by 1.5 points. And there are polls, Rasmussen, Trafalgar, Insider Advantage, that have him pretty much even and 1 or 2 ahead sometimes. So as long as he's 46% in all these liberal polls, 45, he's really even. And then the ones that have him down 12, those are just like the Iowa caucus, the Iowa poll, where he was supposed to lose Iowa by 3 points and he won by 12. The Des Moines Register poll.
Well, I think in the first 6 months, Donald Trump has shown a lot of the lies of the left. Well, let's turn to the next thing. There was a beating of a young man who was trying to help a woman who was getting beat up by several young men. And he was, in fact, the guy that got the name Big Balls from the Doge group that is helping the government. And Donald Trump said he's going to think about, or he wouldn't rule out that the federal government might have to take over D.C. because D.C. doesn't seem to be able to police itself after this incident.
Well, he was interviewed in a lot of those Doge meetings, and he was always very sincere, and he went to Washington to try to cut spending. He thought he was doing a patriotic thing. So here you have this young kid. He's not overly big. He's walking along and he sees a woman in a car attacked by a bunch of gangbangers. And the last thing anybody would do probably was go over there. They should, and try to save her. And one against, I don't know how many, 3, 4, 5. He doesn't know if they're armed. They have knives, guns. He just plunges right in. And he distracts them enough that she's able to get away, and he's almost beaten to death. And this comes, and no one really wants to talk about it. But Washington, D.C. is, it's one of the highest crime rates in the country. And it's the black middle class that runs Washington, D.C. does not live in Washington, D.C. The black population has gone from about 75% down to 40%. So the surrounding upscale neighborhoods are upscale professional blacks who have good jobs in Washington, but they don't want to live there because they understand this pathology of crime. And the question is, it's an international city. It's the iconic city of America, and people are coming over here, and it's not safe to walk. Just 5 years ago, when I would go to the Bradley Foundation, I walked from the Building Industries Convention Hall back to the center of town. It was about a mile and a half. I did that at night twice. You couldn't do that at night now. So everything since 2020 and defund the police and the George Floyd post-violence has gone downhill. Some places crime has started to stop as you get more deportations and you get no more defund the police and you get rid of the Soros prosecutors. You start to see a decrease in crime. But not in Washington too much. And Donald Trump, it's a federal city. It's not necessarily, it has no state domain. So he has certain rights, not complete rights, but rights to adjudicate how it's run.
Okay, Victor. So there was another very interesting article by Stanley Kurtz in the National Review Online, and he was arguing, or he was asking the question, is DEI dying? And he says, well, if we look at the issues, the border, crime, policing, abortion, school choice, the right and conservatism is making huge inroads. Like there's lots of victory. He said, but the left still has control of education, the media, the foundations of government, although that's changing a lot. And so he said, well, you can't really say that there is a big win, but there might be a conservative movement, and maybe for the next 12 years, if conservatives win the government for the next 12 years. But he said it was a little bit not so optimistic. He said in the yin and yang of politics, they'll probably eventually swing back to the left. And I wanted to read the conclusion that he had here. He said, the ability to envision a significantly more conservative future is important as well as novel. The left has lost its certainty about the future, and this is by itself has had huge consequences for its ability to intimidate and silence others. Knowing that a more conservative future is perfectly possible is a victory for freedom that, in the end, may be the most important outcome of the conservative cultural comeback. And I was wondering your thoughts on that.
What he's saying is that if you have a Democratic administration, they're lawless. So even though the Supreme Court had ruled in 2023 that you could not use race-based admissions, nobody followed it in the university, not until Donald Trump issued that executive order. It was illegal through the civil rights statutes. So what he's saying is if you have a Democratic administration, they won't enforce the law because they have a higher law, what they call morality, global cosmic morality. So they'll just defy court orders and say, we have our own law. They always do that. But DI is dying, but not because necessarily Donald Trump is trying to kill it. It has certain internal contradictions. We're a multiracial society and we're 68 to 70% white. We're 10 to 12 to 13% black. We're about 10 to 12% Hispanic. And then we're probably 4 or 5% Asian. You, in a multiracial, and 1/4 of most Latinos and Asians and whites marry outside their racial group. So when you say somebody is eligible for DI consideration, what does that mean? You have two choices. You can say, we're above all that. We're not Nazis. We're not genealogists. We're not ethnically obsessed. So we don't check you. And we wouldn't lower ourselves to say it's 1/4 non-white or 1/8 non-white that allows you DEI consideration. But then if you don't do that and you don't go the full Confederacy, then you get Mamdani and you get Elizabeth Warren, frauds. And there's thousands of them.
Ward Churchill, don't
Ward
forget him.
Churchill. And I've seen them my whole career in academia. Somebody who was whiter than I am telling me that she was the granddaughter of a Spanish, Argentine, Native American. So you can't tell anymore. And two, it doesn't work in a multiracial democracy when you have all these different factions and they are identifying primarily by race. Do you really think that there's a rainbow coalition? There's not. We saw what happened in Los Angeles at that horrific city council meeting about 4 years ago when the city council members they got caught on a hot mic, those Hispanics, and they were saying the most racist things about black people and gay people. It was horrible. And as someone who lives in a primarily Hispanic city, I can tell you that I don't see a rainbow coalition. I don't. So each faction then will fight each other. And it's like, as I said earlier, nuclear proliferation. If you go down that chauvinistic route, if Jasmine Crockett keeps saying white, 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 or if Professor Kendi says you have to be a racist to stop racism, well, finally you're going to get people who say, okay, I'm a tribalist too. I'm going to have a European American affinity graduation. And I'm going to have a theme house at Stanford called the Euro House, just like these other groups. And where will that end? And then the next thing is not just that you can't tell what a person is anymore clearly, and you don't want to have a tribal fighting, but class doesn't matter anymore. It's hard. It used to be, affirmative action was based on the idea of historic oppression against blacks, Jim Crow, slavery, and that made them economically disadvantaged. But when you look at the groups in America, I think whites are number 9 ethnic groups, all these different Asian American groups, and some Arab American, they have a higher income. So how can you give Mr. Mandami say that he's a minority when Indians from India are the wealthiest ethnic economic group in the United States? So you can be very dark from India, but you can be privileged. So that doesn't work anymore. I mean, you're going to give affirmative action to Michelle's daughters or to LeBron's kid or to Joy Reid's children. There's no connection necessarily anymore. There's more poor white people in actual numbers than anybody. So that is something that, so class is a new element that if you had it based on class, it might be more effective, but you're not going to do that with these tribalists. And so when you look at all these contradictions, and then finally there's a final one, that's proportional representation. That was the keystone of DEI. We're going to have a whole country where everything is going to be 67% white, 13% black, and if not, we're going to sue you. And they did. And the Supreme Court, kind of upheld that. So, faculty, take faculty. There's 75% of faculty members in the United States are white. They only make up about 67 to 70%, so they're overrepresented. And that means we've had DEI hires by race. However, 55% of all students are non-white in all colleges. Yet whites are 67 to 70%. So are you going to say, okay, you're going to hire non-white people so you get up so whites only represent their percentage in the population. So you're going to get rid of 5% of all white faculty members to get it down. But now you're going to have affirmative action for white to get the 55% whites up to 70. You want to do that? No.
Sounds confusing.
Yes. And then you're saying, well, merit Merit is a construct. White people made these rules, like the SAT, that are designed to prejudice people who didn't have SAT camp. Okay, about 70% on average of the NBA and the NFL are black Africans. So 12 to 13% of the population gets to play or gets these positions. It's the most prestigious, high-paid jobs in the United States. Most glory, most publicity, millions of dollars of spin-off side hustles on ads. And then you say, well, they're there because they're meritocratic. They're better athletes. But you just said that merit was a construct. So if you don't get a good math score, you just throw out the merit and say it's racist. But if you can catch a pass better than somebody else, it's not, that's merit. And I agree that it is. But would the African American community want somebody to come in and say, well, we're going to apply the same standards that we do with university admissions or the post office to the NFL? And we think the marquee positions are center. So we're going to have a big white guy as center, and quarterback. We're going to have an Asian guy as quarterback, and running back will be 2 Hispanics on every team, so that we get it down to a diverse. So America, the NFL looks like America. And by the way, we can do this because your artificial brand called merit is a construct. You just created this to help African Americans dominate the whole field. But if you didn't have that quote unquote, that's what they're saying. Nobody would believe that. Nobody would want that. Would you want to be an affirmative action quarterback? Say, no, you wouldn't. And so,
DEI quarterback.
So the point is, you can't apply this. And I'm being charitable. Stanford let in, as I said before, 9% white males the last 2 or 3 years until recently at Stanford. And so that was repertory admissions. So what I'm getting at, whether it's no consideration of class or intermarriage, or it doesn't work when you go tribal, or proportional representation is hypocritical. It doesn't work anymore, and it's getting worse, and people are sick of it. So they should just get rid of it and let people get out and mingle and do whatever they want to do.
Did you see that New York Post front page that had the African American meets the Native American when Elizabeth Warren and Mondami met each other?
Had a kind of a subtext.
They were making fun of that.
Didn't they say on the bottom, liars meet or something?
Yeah, liars. Yeah,
liars.
Like a lie.
Yeah, he tried to game it and say he was African American. She tried to game it. But the thing is, she was listed in the Harvard faculty book as the first Native American, and she's never tried to withdraw that. All she said is she has high cheekbones. And when Donald Trump dared her to take, I never understood that some person supposedly so brilliant in Harvard Law School would take Donald Trump up on his troll. So she took the DNA test, and then she got almost an infinitesimally small amount, and then he just invented Pocahontas.
I think what's more disturbing about them on a serious note is that they're trying to push a socialist narrative, both of those, Mondami and Warren. And so I don't, do you think that's not going to work?
Well, yeah,
if the Democratic Party becomes the Socialist Party, it's going to
They're like
disappear.
Soviets that had dakas on the Black Sea, you know what I mean? That nobody, I mean, Mondami just had a lavish wedding in Uganda that was behind an estate with walls and all. It was multi-$1,000. Socialists don't do that. Elizabeth Warren wrote a book about how to flip houses and make profit and then get out and flip another one. She did. And so, and then she had a cookbook of Native American recipes.
That she stole from the New York Times,
that she
apparently.
stole. So she's a complete fraud, and she's a fraudster, and she's always looking for fraud. Just look in the mirror, Elizabeth. Mondami is going to be elected by about 10% of the resident population of New York. So
there you have that. Well, Victor, let's go ahead and take our last break and then come back and finish off the show. Stay with us and we'll be right back.
Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. Delete Me knows your privacy is worth protecting. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me isn't just a one-time service. Delete Me is always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want on the internet. I use Delete Me and I'm very happy with it. But when I get my report, I'm always stunned to see how much information about me that should be mine alone is out there. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting Victor to 64000. The only way to get 20% off is to text Victor to 64000. That's Victor to 64000. Message and data rates may apply.
Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. I think the second story this week that had the most news about it, and was at the very beginning of the week, was the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out with only 73,000 jobs created last month, even when the economy was growing and the statistics on the GDP were a 3% growth rate. So everybody was confused by those disparate statistics, and apparently they had to revise their low job count statistics. And Trump fired Erica McIntyre, who was the head of the Bureau of
Everybody
Labor
got angry.
Statistics.
Wall Street Journal wrote an op-ed. Donald Trump did not like the score, so he had to change the umpire. Yeah, maybe, but usually when they issue their statistics, they have moderate changes, like 100,000 June jobs will go down to 80 or up to 120, but they were doing tens of thousands of changes. And they say, well, not all the business report to us. No, you were just coming out with stuff, and then there were these changes that you decided. 70% of the administrative state is left-wing, so you would expect that. And it's everywhere. Do you remember when we had the vaccinations and Pfizer was told that they were going to make an announcement on October 30th that the Pfizer vaccination, which at that time we were told cured you, protected you. Remember Fauci? If you get this new mRNA vaccination, you will neither be infectious nor will you be infected. And we expect a rollout in October. And then all of a sudden we found out, well, wait a minute, if we do that, Donald Trump is going to claim Operation Warp Speed is his own, and he's going to get credit right before the 2000, and he might beat Biden. So we'll just say, oh, remember that? And they delayed the announcement so that you couldn't hear until after the election. And then it was later told in page 20 of the New York Times that there were people that grumbled that they could have made the announcement as promised before the election. And what we saw with the FBI and the CIA and the Lois Lerner at the IRS, and they don't like conservative people. They want people that want big government, more government employees. As a person who was a state employee for 21 years with a guaranteed paycheck, and I guess 18 years of those were tenured. Once you're tenured, and that's what those people basically are, and you get a check no matter what you do, well, you know what you're going to get. I'll give you one quick example. For a brief period, the California Faculty Association, that represents all of the 23 CSUs, the largest university in the world, it's got over 30,000 faculty members. They fought merit pay. And they said for 3 years, you could have merit pay. And merit pay would be adjudicated on your teaching evaluations and your publications. So I had written a lot of books, and they gave me some merit pay. And then all of a sudden, and also your faculty behavior or comportment, or that was a third, not comportment, but it was performances. That meant you were on committees, you did this. So all of a sudden I would walk, I swear to the Almighty, within a week of that passing, I walked through my hallway, and the next thing I knew, all the doors were open and they were there for their 2 to 4 o'clock office hours. And then I looked at their doors and all these things were pasted on it. a letter that somebody wrote. Hey, Bill Smith, that's a good idea about a book you might want to write. Paste it on there. And then there was all this grouching, and people would come up to me. I remember that C-SPAN was doing like an hour thing on me because I've written about farming, and they just came down the hallway. It was right during merit pay, and they started looking at me, C-SPAN. And then there was also a story in the New Yorker about this book I wrote, Feels About Dream. And this guy comes across, didn't even ask me. My neighbor, a faculty member, he says this C-SPAN, it's not allowed at Cal State Fresno for you to be in a hallway filming Professor Hanson. You have to leave immediately. And I said, oh, poor baby, are you upset? I said, go over there. So they said, we got to leave. I said, no, you don't. All you have to do is this. We're in merit pay now. And you go over and tell him that while you're interviewing me, you're also interested in English literature for an upcoming, and you do an interview with him for 5 minutes. So they walk in and they said, would you like to do an interview? Well, yes, I would. So my point is, that's the mind of a state employee. And then all of a sudden, you know what they did? The union, they passed a law that said that whether you were in the union or not, you had to give money to it. Closed shop. So their budget rocketed from 15% of faculty to 100% paying dues. So they had all this money. They lobbied the legislature, the government. They got rid of merit pay. And guess what they did then? They passed the Adjustment Act, the faculty compensation adjustment. So if you had merit pay and you were getting like $5,000 more than anybody else in your pay bracket, based on seniority, then you were kind of retarded for a while, so people could catch up, and you were punished for publishing. And the nice thing about it was, when they had 10% or 20 or 30%, I'm not sure what particular year that people voluntarily were in the union and gave them dues. They had no money, so they'd come up to your door and say, can you come to the Friday pizza party for the CF California faculty? And you'd go there, and they had root beer and pizza. We got to organize. Each one of you has to get 3 people. And then once they had automatic dues, no. They didn't want you going anywhere. They didn't want you showing up. They started passing rules that if there weren't this many Hispanics or blacks that were elected as officers of the union, they were going to appoint them. They hated members showing up because they didn't need you. They had your money. And so that's the mind of the state employee that Trump is dealing with. And I'm not making fun of many of you out there are state employees. My parents were state employees. My mother was a judge, and my father worked for his community college district. I worked 21 years with the CSU system. It's noble.
There are important jobs that need to be done.
They're very
Yes.
important jobs. I'm just saying you have to fight the mentality that you can't be fired and you deserve a guaranteed salary and you're always demanding more. And you look at the guy at the 7-Eleven or the tire shop or the hamburger stand, and they have no guarantees. And so they have a different mindset, is what I'm saying.
All right, Victor.
I know I'm going to get a lot of letters from state employees.
Well, Victor, you were talking earlier about culture wars and the left complaining about freedom of thought, speech, or at least they didn't allow for freedom. So, yeah, long way to say Howard Stern is retiring. And of course, the stories are all tinged with, well, it's because of Donald Trump and the lack of freedom of speech or something. But nobody cares. He doesn't have to retire. Get out there and do your usual thing,
We know why
Howard
he's
Stern.
retiring. He's retiring the way that Stephen Colbert is retiring, because Howard Stern, for 30 years, made a fortune by doing 2 or 3 things. He hated all politicians, and he was center-left, but he didn't really come across as left-wing. He attacked everybody, and he was completely filthy-mouthed, And he had people on his show that pulled down their pants, and he looked at their phalluses and he did all sorts of horrific things. And he was a shock jock. And he would his people would call up people, and remember how they'd bait them and say, "Hey, by the way, did you know that your car has a flat tire?" And the guy would go, "Ha ha ha," stuff like that. And that's how he built that huge audience. And and then he got divorced, and he married, can I say the word hot, a hot kind of model who was left wing. And then he got this huge contract. I don't know what it was, 20 million a year or something. And he settled in during COVID. He didn't go out anywhere. He was terrified of getting infected. Maybe he was smart. Someone who's got long COVID twice, COVID itself 4 times. But my point is, he just turned into a hate Trump and then very staid, predictable left-wing Joy Reid, right? In other words, he had a loyal base, but it wasn't worth what he was getting in the marketplace, and they were losing money on him. So when his contract came up, they were going to give him substantially less money. And he didn't need it anymore because he'd made all of this on his prior reputation. And then so it was like Colbert, $20 million a year, but you're losing 40, and we give you a budget of 100. And so all these people, again, they should remember what Michael Jordan said. Michael Jordan, why don't you come out on the left where you belong? Because Republicans buy sneakers too. So, we're conservative on this podcast, but we talk about issues where we criticize everybody. You know what I mean? And I do. And you don't insult people who disagree with you. We don't use foul language or yell and scream. So you want to bring in things that all people can appreciate, but we have a definite point of view. But Howard Stern's point of view was that Donald Trump was Satan incarnate, and he was horrible. And he said that literally. He said, "I don't hate Donald Trump. I just hate the people who voted for him." And he was a pal of Donald Trump. Melania and Donald Trump used to go on his show and talk about their sex life. Yeah.
Seriously? I didn't hear that part of it, but
Look it
I'm
up.
willing to learn.
As they say, look it up.
But the whole obfuscating the real reasons for things, I think, is just becoming increasingly clear. Last thing this week, apparently, and this I got from powerlineblog.com, so a great place to go for information. People that were banking at JP Morgan and Bank of America are coming out and saying that they were his business associates, Donald Trump's business associates, were being threatened if they would do business with Donald Trump. And their words were, or the sources' words were, they put the fear of God in you if you tried to do business with Donald Trump.
They did a secondary boycott. They debanked Melania and Barron Trump. He couldn't get his money out. His son. And so I don't see why they can't be sued if you can deny a person a bank account because of their race or sexual orientation, and you can't do that if they qualify according to your own standards. How can you do it for political reasons? They should all be sued for that. And why does the left do that? Because it sends a message. If you are a high-profile person and if you want to be anti-left, we have insidious ways of getting you. And speaking as someone who, this house that I'm speaking at was swatted a few months ago, and speaking as someone who, I don't know if I've said that before, who went into the bank and found the entire bank account completely and another account gone, like zero. Somebody went in and hacked and stole everything out of it. I think that was political. And if someone who gets emails that are pretty threatening sometimes, that's what the left does. And they've got to stop it. And one of the ways you can stop it is they have to be culpable when they start to do that. And that's so weird, is because they're supposed to be big civil rights people that don't judge people on their views. It's what we were told during the McCarthy period, I can remember my father telling me when he was an administrator at JC Farm, he was an administrator, and he said, when I came here after World War II, They tried to make you have an oath. Sign it. Sign an oath. I have never done this. And that's exactly what DEI was. Before you could get hired, you had to sign a DEI affidavit at many universities saying that you were a pure-blooded supporter of DEI, or you wouldn't get hired. A lot of people didn't get hired when they refused or didn't fill out the oath form in the same way they expected.
I guess I'm just a little surprised at businesses, and especially businesses like banks. I mean, business is business. You shouldn't be, bringing your politics in. Well, we're going to threaten you if not to do business with you if you're going to do business with Donald Trump.
It's called
It's
a
crazy.
secondary boycott. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be illegal.
It's absolutely crazy. Well, anyways, that's the news. We'd like to thank everybody that comes to our podcast and listens. Today I'm looking at YouTube and Victor and Jack's recent Tuesday podcast for comments, and here are a few comments from our listeners. This man, I'm assuming it's a man, maybe it's a woman. Siege upon 5894. He gives a quote from your guys' podcast. Quote, "When America sneezes, the world catches a cold," end quote. Never was a truer thing said. While America has recovered with a gusto, we in the UK and most of the Western world are currently on life support. Your words of wisdom, Mr. VDH, while not a panacea to the ills of the West, are an inspiration. The medicine that I take daily, thank you, sir. You are the medicine he takes daily. That's from the UK.
Yeah,
I
you have
like
to do
that.
4 things. Close your border. Close your border. No more illegal immigration. No more people from an anti-West Middle East coming in illegally. 2, use your natural gas, nuclear power, clean coal. Don't go with the solar, wind, EV, and subsidize expensive energy. Doesn't work. Open up your society so you allow free speech and people to disagree with each other on social media. Just let it go. And then 4, start to trim away and deregulate the socialist state. Let the talented people among you be rewarded and honored for what they bring to your society. Make it a country of Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and people like that. Even Mark Zuckerberg. Bring them all in. Let them do what they have to do to help the country.
Since you brought up Elon Musk, I was driving to work today and I have a Tesla, by the way. My Tesla and then 2 other Teslas came up beside me on the freeway. I was thinking, wow, this is cool. These Tesla cars are just going to be like the Model T. And I was
I
thinking,
don't
I
think
should
that boycott
invest.
is going to work because the Tesla is a better product than the alternative.
Yeah, but get this. And then I pulled off and there was at the gas station when I got off the freeway, a Tesla truck, Pepsi truck. He was unloading at the quick stop.
One of those monster trucks?
Yeah, it was a gigantic Mack truck, but it was Tesla.
No,
I was
I
like,
didn't know they had those
yes,
yet.
it was really cool. All right, so this one's from A. Tatterson or A.T. Atterson, 6992. Victor, if you happen to see this, the pinkish book near your right ear looks to be one of the volumes of Churchill's accounts of World War II. Such an interesting read,
Yes, there
directly
is.
from the brain and war room of one of the greatest Brits to have walked among us. Glad to see you happy, sir.
I am a big supporter of Winston Churchill, and when the historian who attacked him as a terrorist on Tucker Carlson, I wrote immediately for, I think it was Substack and my own column, I wrote at least 3,000 or 4,000 words in defense of Churchill. It's not hard to defend Churchill in World War II. He saved the Western world from September 1st, 1939 to basically December 7th, 1941. Maybe June 22nd, 41, when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. But he was all alone. He was First Lord of the Admiralty, and then he was made Prime Minister on May 10th of 1940. But in those years, there was only not very many people who thought they could stand up to Italy and Japan and Germany. He did. He was a beautiful. Nobody's ever been able to write English. No political leader has ever been able to speak or write English the way he did.
And didn't he have a whiskey in the morning and at noon or something? And
He wasn't an
he wasn't
alcoholic.
afraid of alcohol, though.
He wasn't an alcoholic. He was able to drink amounts that would sicken other people, but I don't think he didn't get to the point. He had a buzz, but I don't think he got to the point where he was incapacitated by it. He had one of the secrets to his success is he got ill a lot. He had pneumonia and he flew into North Africa with like 102 temperature, and they gave him experimental penicillin, and he was in the United States and he had a heart attack. But he kept, I mean, he got almost died in an auto accident. So he was always being shot at or sick or hit or wounded, or, you know what I mean? I don't mean wounded in the sense of an accident. He had enormous constitution powers of recovery.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Very little sleep.
Well, Victor, we're at the end. I have to mention, though, that on all those comments, because you and Jack talked about Canada, there were a lot of comments from Canadians who agreed with you that there's a problem with the government, basically. And
I like Canadians. I always have. I always like Canadians. I just think that Mr. Trudeau did a lot of things that hurt Canada. One of the best prime minister, I think, any English-speaking country with a parliamentary system had is Stephen Harper. For 10 years, he was prime minister. He tried his best. I mean, he tried to meet the 2%. He wasn't able to get the Canadian Parliament to go along with him, but it was a very well-run country then. And hopefully it'll get back. I hope he would run again, but what's his name? Polyev with the apple. That was one of the tragedies, just to finish today, that when Donald Trump, if he was going to go after Canada for the not paying the 2% and the $63 billion in trade surpluses and less than muscular enforcement of our northern border, he could have waited till after the election, because he got that criticism created a chauvinism in Canada. Whatever Trump is for, we're against. And they were against the conservative. Although Trump may have wanted Carney, I don't know why. Trump gets along with left-wing politicians like Sturmer and Carney.
He does. He surely does. So he's unique
not an ideologue.
person. No, not at all. Well, thank you, Victor, for all your wisdom today, and thanks to our audience for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening.
Yeah, this is the Victor Davis Hanson Show, and I'm Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.